If any of you remember the Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep DLC that introduced us to the Borderlands equivalent to Dungeons and Dragons and wished that it actually existed, then you're in luck, as during 2020, Gearbox announced that Bunkers and Badasses is now a real thing, to which many rejoiced. Naturally, I pre-ordered a copy and awaited with bated breath for any news or updates on the game's development. However, with it fully developed and now ready to ship, the coronavirus pandemic has made it impossible to ship out to all pre-orders, and as such we are left waiting longer. But, through an act of generosity, Nerdvana Games has given anyone who pre-ordered the game a gift to make up for the delays, which brings about good news, bad news, more good news and funny news. The good news, the gift in question, is Marcus and the Wizard's Wand module that the voice actors played earlier last year. The bad news, it is a part of the core book, so it is more of an early access sneak peek than an actual surprise extra that they made it out to be. And we won't be making our characters from scratch, it is all pre-made. More good news, we can still get to play, despite how unclear some of the rules are. So it falls down to speculation, which isn't as bad as it seems. The funny news, they asked us not to post or leak the module outside of personal use and friendship groups.
You serious?
It's hilarious that they thought people wouldn't do that, despite using memes and references from the internet itself. But it is nice to know that they have trust in us, despite how misplaced it is. But I digress. It is a good opportunity to give people a chance to understand how Bunkers and Badasses will stand out amongst the RPG crowd and give us an opportunity to familiarize ourselves with the mechanics. Now, out of respect for the developers of the game, I will not talk about the contents of the module, but to glance over the mechanics of Bunkers and Badasses whilst giving a simplified explanation, except for two mechanics that have piqued my interest and I feel they are worth explaining in more detail. Plus, I do not want to add to an already oversaturated format of droning into a microphone over every single detail with an image that you can barely see on the screen. For a TLDR, Bunkers and Badasses is just Dungeons and Dragons with guns. For a not so TLDR, Bunkers and Badasses takes a lot of inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons mechanics, which is obvious as its original intent was to be a parody of it, like so many other forms of media. However, the parody was used as a foundation to build and fine-tune how Bunkers and Badasses incorporates the fast-paced loot and shoot gameplay of Borderlands to a tabletop format, which is a good segue to talk about combat and compare the two together. Also, I will be referring to Bunkers and Badasses to B&B to make things simple. Now, for combat. Both have you roll for initiative and use a d20 for all of your actions, but the similarities end there. In D&D, a player's turn is defined by three things: action, bonus action and movement.
There are a few more things you can do in a turn, but we're not going into specifics.
In B&B, a player's turn is defined by 9 moves: shoot, movement, toss grenade, throw, swap weapons, reload, action skill, perform a check and drink a potion. Which is a lot one can do in a turn. Attacking is the same. You say who you want to hit with your depopulation MacGuffin and roll the dice. With D&D, it is a British Tea Party by using a mathematical equation of whether you hit or not, no matter how close you are to the target, and then roll damage. With B&B, it is a redneck BBQ. You just look at the stat card of your gun and see how many bullets actually hit their mark based on the number you rolled, and then roll damage based on how many bullets hit.
There is some math involved, and melee is a thing, but this isn't a how to play, so we're not going to talk about it.
Skills are also paradoxical. D&D has more on their character sheet and B&B has less. D&D is simplistic. You say you're going to do a thing, roll the dice, and see whether you did the thing or not. B&B is more complex, as each skill branches off into a tree that becomes specific to that skill. For example, the Siren wants to make an insight check on someone to see if they are hiding malicious motives. In D&D they would just use the insight skill and call it a day. With B&B it would branch into a danger insight check. However, this is only just guesswork as I'm reading this from the pre-made character sheets, so I could be wrong. Until we have a hands on the core rulebook this will remain vague, as there are no rules for using skills outside of combat in the module. To be honest, having skills branch out into more a specific field such as this seems more unnecessarily complicated for both the bunker master and player. But that's just me. That is all the comparisons exhausted with all that was given to us in the module. Now I want to talk about the two mechanics I spoke about earlier. The mayhem system and badass moves. Badass moves are what it says on the label, a move that is completely over the top batshit insane. In D&D, you would normally do this after getting the finishing blow on a difficult opponent or to add a little flair to your attack. Here is an example.
I want to run up and do a backwards kick off him, pirouette twirl while shooting arrows before doing a superhero landing.
Okay, roll for athletics and a ranged attack roll.
21 and 19.
Okay, you do the thing. Roll for damage.
4 points.
Okay, he takes 4 points of damage. Now in B&B.
I want to run up to him, punch him the balls, and when he screams, shove a grenade into his mouth, headbutting it so it's more secure, then kick him away and shoot the grenade, turning away so I don't look at the explosion.
Okay, roll the dice.
23.
That bitch is dead, and you can use major stat points now. In short, badass moves are a high risk high reward action that rewards players with a stat boost and maybe instantly killing the target, or at the very least, doing a lot of damage. How it works is simple. The player announces they are going to make a badass move. Player describes the move using all the actions they can do in a turn. Any other player can chime in to help. The BM decides what the difficulty is based on their description. Players roll the badass die and apply their badass rank. If it beats the DC then they receive 4 badass tokens, 2 for assisting players, and use big stats for the rest of their turn. If it fails, well, it's kind of obvious what would happen, but they still receive tokens, only less of them. I think this is a great mechanic which, in a way, encourages players to take a more narrative description of making their characters look cool. In fact, this actually encourages the BM to get their players to add more flair to their move if they think the player description wasn't badass enough. However, due to how insanely rewarding badass moves are, they can only be done once in game day, which I think is fair. Next is the mayhem system. Because the action economy of B&B is much richer than D&D, players can do a total of 9 actions, in comparison to enemies, who can only do about 2 at best. Also, your players are entities of destruction, so the game is stacked against the opposition, rather than for them. This is where the mayhem system comes into play. Mayhem, or mayhem stacks, is a currency used by the bunker master, and is generated by the player's actions or failures, and is used whenever you, the BM, feels is appropriate for it to be spent. Make an enemy use a special action to do a bit more damage. Did they just kill that lone grunt? Well, in his last breath he pulls out one last trick before he goes out. No one has been hurt for a while. Make someone spontaneously combust. Why? Because reasons. To break this down more, mayhem is gained when a player fails a skill check, the enemy rolls a crit, or the actions throw, reload, swap weapons, or an extra movement and attack is performed. Every enemy has what is called a mayhem action. Think of this as legendary actions in D&D, but everyone, even the weakest cannon fodder, has this. It enables them to do more damage to the players, provided that they hit and mix up the battle just a smidgen. There is also a rando stuff table, which mayhem can be spent to use to cause random effects to happen in or out of combat. Just spend a point of mayhem, roll a percentile die, and check the table for whatever the results were. Then make it as cohesive as possible. And that is about it. I can say for certain that Nerdvana Games has managed to incorporate the chaotic and humorous nature of the Borderlands gameplay and universe into a tabletop format that does it justice. I truly cannot wait for the full experience and share the joy of looting and shooting as my own character, or controlling the fates of others. But as a side note, I do think that the module should have added a few more rule clarifications to make things more clearer instead of mere speculation and guesswork. But hey, we can play now, so let's work with what we got. As a final thought, with the disastrous and downright mistake that was the Borderlands 3 story, I would say that we as fans can use this opportunity to write and create our own stories and characters within the Borderlands universe that are as deep, enriching and filled with fart jokes that caused us to love the cast and story of the Borderlands games in the first place. Now go out there and cause some mayhem. If you've made it this far, then thank you for watching. It is my first time doing something like this. If you enjoyed it, leave your comments and criticism in the comments section below. There are other buttons that do things. You use YouTube, you know what they do. Stay safe and take care. Goodbye.